saloon door swung open with a crash that made every head turn, and Winona Wright knew in that terrible instant that her life was about to shatter into pieces she would never be able to put back together the same way again. Thomas had been gone for 3 hours, gambling away money they did not have at the poker table in the back room, and now he stood in the doorway with wild eyes and sweat running down his temples despite the cool September evening in Monticello, Utah. It was 1878, and Winona had been with Thomas for 2 years, believing every promise he had made about building a life together on the small ranch his father had left him. She was 20 years old, and Thomas was 23, and she had thought that was enough time to know a person's heart. "Winona," Thomas said, his voice cracking like dry leather, "we need to talk." She set down the glass she had been polishing behind the bar where she worked 6 nights a week to help make ends meet. The saloon owner, a decent man named Herbert, had given her honest work when she needed it most. The other patrons had gone back to their drinks and their conversations, but she could feel their attention lingering at the edges, waiting for whatever drama was about to unfold. "What have you done?" she asked, because she knew Thomas well enough by now to recognize guilt written across every line of his face. He crossed the room in quick strides and grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back entrance. She went with him because refusing would have made a scene, but her heart was hammering against her ribs with a fear she could not name. Outside in the alley, the September air smelled of dust and horse manure and the distant promise of autumn in the high desert country. "I got in deep tonight," Thomas said, not meeting her eyes. "Real deep. There was this hand, and I was so sure, Winona. I had 3 queens, and I bet everything." "What do you mean, everything?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "The ranch, the cattle, everything." He finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her blood run cold. "And when that was not enough to cover the debt, I had to offer something else." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What else could you possibly have offered?" "You," he whispered. "I offered you." For a moment, Winona could not process the words. They sat in her ears like foreign sounds, meaningless and impossible. Then understanding crashed over her like a flash flood in the canyons, drowning her in disbelief and horror. "You sold me? Like I am property? Like I'm a horse or a piece of furniture?" Her voice rose with each word until she was nearly shouting. "Marcus Dalton won the hand," Thomas said quickly, desperately. "He is a rich man, Winona. He has a big house in town. He said he needs a woman to run his household, to host his dinners. It would not be so bad. You would have fine clothes and good food," and she slapped him. Her palm connected with his cheek with a crack that echoed off the wooden buildings surrounding them. "I loved you," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "I gave up everything for you. I left my family. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to help you keep that ranch running. And you sold me to pay a gambling debt?" "I did not have a choice." Thomas grabbed her shoulders, shaking her slightly. "Marcus said if I could not pay, his men would kill me. They would burn the ranch and salt the earth. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to be a man," Winona said, jerking away from him. "You were supposed to protect me, not trade me away like a poker chip." Before Thomas could respond, 3 men emerged from the shadows at the end of the alley. The one in the center was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a black coat that marked him as a man of means. His face was hard and angular, with eyes that assessed her the way a rancher might evaluate livestock at auction. "Miss Wright," Marcus Dalton said, tipping his hat with mock courtesy, "I see Thomas has informed you of our arrangement." "There is no arrangement," Winona said, drawing herself up to her full height, even though she barely reached the man's shoulder. "I am not property to be wagered and won. I am a free woman, and I will not go with you." Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I am afraid the law sees things differently. Thomas here signed a contract, witnessed and notarized. You were listed as collateral against his debt. If you refuse to honor that contract, I will have no choice but to press charges against Thomas for fraud. He will hang." "Let him hang!" Winona spat. But even as she said it, she knew she did not mean it. Despite everything, despite the betrayal that burned like acid in her chest, She could not sentence Thomas to death. Think carefully, Miss Wright, Marcus continued. Come with me willingly and you will be treated well. I am not a cruel man. I simply need a woman to manage my household and appear at my side during social functions. Refuse, and Thomas dies, and you will end up destitute on the street. I imagine Herbert would not keep you on at the saloon once word spreads about this situation. People talk in small towns. Winona looked at Thomas, searching his face for any sign of the man she had thought she loved. She found only cowardice and shame. You would let me go with him? You would stand there and watch him take me? I am sorry, Thomas whispered. I am so sorry, Winona. She turned back to Marcus. If I go with you, Thomas's debt is paid in full. He keeps the ranch. That was the agreement. Then I want something in writing that says I'm there of my own free will, that I can leave whenever I choose, and that I will be paid wages for my work. Marcus considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. Very well, I can agree to those terms. Shall we say $50 a month? It was more than she made at the saloon, and they both knew it. Winona swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill down her cheeks. Fine, but I will not share your bed. That is not part of this arrangement. I have no interest in forcing myself on unwilling women, Marcus said coldly. I have other outlets for such needs. Now get whatever belongings you have. My carriage is waiting on Main Street. Winona brushed past Thomas without another word. She went back into the saloon through the rear entrance, past Herbert, who gave her a concerned look but said nothing, and up the narrow stairs to the tiny room she rented above the bar. Her possessions fit into a single carpet bag, 3 dresses, some undergarments, a hairbrush that had been her mother's, and a small leather-bound journal where she had been writing her thoughts since she was a girl. She took one last look around the room that had been her refuge for the past 18 months, then walked back down the stairs and out the front door without saying goodbye to anyone. Marcus's carriage was indeed waiting on Main Street, black and polished, and drawn by 2 matching bay horses. The driver, an older Mexican man with kind eyes, helped her into the passenger compartment while Marcus gave some final instructions to his men. As the carriage rolled through the streets of Monticello toward the large house on the hill overlooking the town, Winona stared out the window and tried to understand how her life had gone so wrong so quickly. This morning she had awakened believing she was building a future with the man she loved. Tonight she was being taken to the home of a stranger who had won her in a card game like she was nothing more than a piece of property. The house was even larger than she had imagined. 2 stories of whitewashed wood with a wide porch and windows that glowed with lamplight. Marcus led her inside without ceremony, calling for his housekeeper, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Chen who looked Winona up and down with obvious disapproval. Show Miss Wright to the guest room on the 2nd floor, Marcus instructed. Tomorrow you will explain her duties. She will be taking over management of the household. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose. And what am I to do, sir? You will assist Miss Wright in learning how things are run, and then you will return to your family in Salt Lake City, as you have been requesting for the past year. I will provide you with 6 months' wages as severance. The housekeeper's expression softened slightly at this news, but she still looked at Winona with suspicion as she led her up the stairs to a bedroom that was larger than the entire room Winona had been renting above the saloon. The bed had a real mattress and clean sheets. There was a wardrobe, a washstand with a porcelain pitcher and basin, and even a small writing desk by the window. Breakfast is at 7, Mrs. Chen said curtly. I suggest you get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. After the housekeeper left, Winona sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. She wept for the loss of her innocence, for the betrayal of the man she had trusted, for the future she had imagined that would now never come to pass. She cried until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw, and then she lay down fully clothed on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion dragged her into a fitful sleep. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of learning routines and trying to establish some sense of order in her new life. Marcus's house was large and required constant attention. She supervised the cleaning, planned the menus, managed the accounts for household expenses, and began preparations for the dinner parties Marcus hosted twice monthly for Monticello's most prominent citizens. Marcus himself was rarely home during the day. He owned the largest cattle operation in San Juan County and spent most of his time managing his business interests. When he was present, he treated Winona with cold politeness, never touching her or making inappropriate demands, but also never speaking to her as though she were a real person rather than a particularly useful piece of furniture. She kept the written agreement he had signed tucked into her journal, proof that she was technically free to leave, though she knew the reality was more complicated. Where would she go? She had no family nearby, no friends who would take her in after the scandal of what Thomas had done. Herbert had already replaced her at the saloon. Monticello was a small town, and everyone knew she was living in Marcus Dalton's house. Her reputation was already ruined. On the 23rd day of her captivity, for that was how she thought of it despite the legal fiction of her employment, Winona was in the general store purchasing supplies for the household when she overheard two women gossiping near the bolts of fabric. "I heard Thomas Wright already has a new woman staying at the ranch," one of them said in a stage whisper that carried clearly across the store. "Some girl from Junction who does not know about his gambling problem yet." "Poor thing," the other woman replied, "though I suppose she is luckier than Winona. At least she is not shackled to Marcus Dalton's household. That man is cold as a January frost." Winona's hands clenched on the list she was holding, crumpling the paper. So Thomas had wasted no time replacing her. The pain of it was surprising in its intensity. She had thought she was done caring what Thomas did, but apparently some part of her had still hoped he might feel enough remorse to at least mourn what he had destroyed. She finished her shopping quickly and arranged for the supplies to be delivered to the house, then stepped out onto the wooden sidewalk and nearly collided with a man leading a horse toward the blacksmith shop across the street. "Pardon me, madam," he said, stepping back and touching the brim of his hat. Winona looked up into the kindest eyes she had ever seen. They were the color of warm honey, set in a tanned face that spoke of long days working under the sun. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly where it brushed the collar of his work shirt. He looked to be in his mid-20s, and there was something in the way he met her gaze that made her feel, for the first time in weeks, like she was actually being seen as a person. "My fault," she said, finding her voice. "I was not watching where I was going." "Are you all right?" he asked, and she could tell he actually cared about the answer. "You look like you have had some bad news." "Just town gossip," Winona said, trying to smile and failing. "Nothing that concerns you." "Well, if you need anything, my name is Lucas Zimmerman. I am new to Monticello, just hired on at the Rocking M Ranch north of town. I do not know much about local gossip yet, which means I am probably the only person in San Juan County who will not judge you for whatever it is people are saying." Despite everything, Winona felt a small, genuine smile tug at the corners of her mouth. "Winona Wright. And you are right, you are probably the only person within 50 miles who does not know my story." "Is it a story you would want to tell sometime, Dicina?" Lucas asked. "I am a pretty good listener, and I have been told I pour an excellent cup of coffee. Are you asking me to have coffee with you, Mr. Zimmerman?" "I suppose I am, Miss Wright, though I should probably mention that I am not what you would call a wealthy man. I am just a cowboy trying to make an honest living. If you are the type of woman who needs fancy restaurants and expensive gifts, I would be wasting both our time." There was something refreshing about his honesty, about the way he seemed completely unaware of or unconcerned with social niceties and games. "I am staying at Marcus Dalton's house," Winona said, wanting to be equally honest, "working as his housekeeper. Most people in town have opinions about that arrangement." Lucas looked at her for a long moment, those honey-colored eyes searching her face. "Are you staying there because you want to, or because you have to?" The question was so direct, so cutting through all the pretense and shame, that Winona felt tears prick at her eyes. "Because I have to," she admitted quietly. "Then I reckon you could use a friend," Lucas said simply. "How about tomorrow afternoon? There is a little place near the creek that runs north of town, not fancy, but it is peaceful. I could meet you there around 2 o'clock if you can get away." Winona knew she should say no. She knew that being seen with another man would only add to the gossip and potentially anger Marcus. But she was so tired of being alone, so desperate for any human connection that did not come with shame and obligation attached. 2:00, she agreed, and by the creek. Lucas's smile transformed his face, lighting it up like sunrise over the red rock canyons. I will be there, Miss Wright. You have my word. He tipped his hat again and led his horse toward the blacksmith, and Winona walked back to Marcus's house feeling something she had not felt in weeks: hope. The next afternoon, she told Mrs. Chen she needed to visit the seamstress about alterations to one of Marcus's shirts. The housekeeper gave her a suspicious look but did not question her, and Winona hurried out of the house before her courage could fail her. The creek Lucas had mentioned was about a 20-minute walk from town, winding through a grove of cottonwood trees that were just beginning to turn gold with the approaching autumn. She found him sitting on a fallen log near the water, a small fire burning in a ring of stones, and a battered coffee pot suspended over it on a makeshift tripod. You came, he said, standing as she approached. The relief and pleasure in his voice made her heart ache in a way that was both painful and sweet. I said I would. People say a lot of things they do not mean, Lucas observed, gesturing for her to sit on the log while he poured coffee into 2 tin cups. I have learned not to count on words too much. Actions tell you who a person really is. Winona accepted the cup and took a sip. The coffee was strong and hot and exactly what she needed. That is a hard lesson to learn. You want to tell me what happened? Lucas asked gently, sitting on the ground near her feet so they were at eye level. Or we can just sit here and enjoy the afternoon. Either way is fine with me. She had not planned to tell him everything. She had thought maybe she would give him a sanitized version that left out the worst details. But something about the way he looked at her, the genuine kindness in his eyes, made her want to be completely honest. So she told him. She told him about Thomas and the ranch and the 2 years she had spent believing in a future that had never really existed. She told him about the night Thomas had gambled away everything, including her, about Marcus Dalton and the contract and the gilded cage she now lived in. She told him about the gossip and the shame and the loneliness that had been eating away at her for weeks. Lucas listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When she finally fell silent, he stared into the fire for a long moment before speaking. That is the most cowardly thing I have ever heard, he said quietly, and I have known some cowards in my time. What Thomas did was not just wrong, it was evil. You deserved better than that. Apparently I did not, Winona said bitterly. Apparently I was not worth more to him than a losing hand of poker. No, Lucas said firmly, reaching out to gently take the coffee cup from her hands and set it aside. Do not do that. Do not let his weakness become something you believe about yourself. You are worth more than gold, Winona Wright. The fact that Thomas was too much of a fool to see that says everything about him and nothing about you. She looked down at him, at this cowboy she had met only yesterday who was speaking to her with more respect and tenderness than Thomas had shown her in 2 years, and something inside her chest cracked open. A sob escaped her throat, then another, and then Lucas was gathering her into his arms, holding her while she cried against his shoulder. I have got you, he murmured into her hair. You are safe now. I have got you. They stayed like that until Winona's tears subsided and she pulled back, embarrassed by her loss of control. I am sorry, she said, wiping at her eyes. I did not mean to fall apart like that. Do not apologize for having feelings, Amor, Lucas said. You have been through something terrible. You are allowed to cry about it. Most men I know would tell me to stop being so emotional and pull myself together. Then most men you know are idiots. He handed her a handkerchief from his pocket. Listen, I know we just met, and I know you probably think I'm crazy for saying this, but I want to help you. If you want to leave Marcus Dalton's house, I will help you figure out how. If you want to stay there but just need someone to talk to sometimes, I can do that too. Whatever you need, I am here." "Why?" Winona asked, searching his face. "Why would you want to help me? You do not even know me." Lucas smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I know what it is like to feel trapped. I know what it is like to have people treat you like you are less than human. And I know what it is like to need someone to show you kindness when the whole world seems determined to grind you down. Someone did that for me once, a long time ago. I guess I'm just trying to pay that forward." They talked until the shadows grew long, and Winona knew she needed to get back before her absence was noticed. Lucas walked her most of the way back to town, stopping at the edge of the settlement where they would not be seen together. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "I would like that," Winona said, "but I do not know when. Marcus does not give me much free time, and people are already talking. If they see us together, it will only make things worse." "Then we will be careful," Lucas said. "I am at the Rocking M most days, but I come into town every Saturday for supplies. I could leave messages for you at the general store with the owner. He seems like a decent man." "Samuel Martinez," Winona said, nodding. "Yes, he is good people. That might work." Over the next month, they developed a careful system of communication. Lucas would leave notes for Winona with Samuel, and she would collect them when she did the household shopping. They managed to meet by the creek 3 more times, always careful to not be seen together, always conscious of the scandal that would erupt if anyone discovered their friendship. Because that was what it was, Winona told herself. A friendship. Nothing more. She was in no position to think about love or romance, not with her life as tangled as it was. But she could not deny that she thought about Lucas constantly, that his notes made her heart race, that the hours she spent with him by the creek were the only times she felt truly alive. Lucas told her about his life during those meetings. He had been born in Texas, the youngest of 5 children in a family that had lost everything during the war. His father had died when Lucas was 12, and he had been working as a cowboy ever since, drifting from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. "I got tired of moving," he admitted during their 4th meeting. "Tired of never having a place that felt like home. That is why I took the job at the Rocking M. The foreman said if I prove myself, there might be an opportunity to buy into a piece of land the ranch is selling off. Nothing big, just 40 acres along the river. But it would be mine, you know? The first thing I have ever owned." "That sounds wonderful," Winona said, and meant it. She could picture Lucas with his own land, building something permanent, becoming part of a community instead of always passing through. "It would be even better with the right partner," Lucas said quietly, and the look he gave her made her breath catch in her throat. "Lucas," she began, but he held up a hand. "I know," he said. "I know you are not free, and I know I have no right to speak of such things, but I need you to know how I feel, Winona. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I already have fallen. And if you ever find a way to leave Marcus Dalton's house, I want you to know that you would have a place with me. Not as a housekeeper or an obligation, but as my partner, my equal, my choice." Tears spilled down Winona's cheeks. "I do not deserve you," she whispered. "You deserve everything good in this world," Lucas said fiercely, "and I aim to give it to you if you will let me." That night, Winona lay awake in her comfortable prison and thought about what Lucas had offered her. Real love, real partnership. Everything Thomas had promised but never delivered. The question was whether she had the courage to reach for it. The decision was made for her 2 weeks later when Marcus called her into his study after dinner. He was standing by the window looking out at the October darkness, and he did not turn around when she entered. "I have been hearing interesting rumors," he said quietly, "about you and a cowboy from the Rocking M." Winona's heart stopped. "We are friends. Nothing inappropriate has happened. I do not care if you have been sharing his bed or simply talking about the weather," Marcus said, finally turning to face her. His expression was cold and dangerous. "You are living in my house. You represent me in this community. I will not have people gossiping about my housekeeper carrying on with ranch hands." "I have done everything you asked of me," Winona said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I have managed your household, hosted your dinners, kept your accounts. I've given you no reason to complain about my work." "Your work is adequate," Marcus agreed. "Your discretion, however, is lacking. I want you to stop seeing this man. If I hear any more rumors about the two of you meeting, I will take action against him. Do you understand?" "What kind of action?" Winona asked, fear creeping into her voice. "The Rocking M relies on several of my business connections. One word from me and your cowboy friend will find himself without employment and blacklisted from every ranch in the territory. Is that clear enough?" It was blackmail, pure and simple, and they both knew it. Winona wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Marcus he had no right to control who she spoke to in her free time, but she could not risk Lucas's livelihood. He was working toward his dream of owning land, and she would not be the reason he lost everything. "I understand," she said quietly. "Good. You are dismissed." Winona walked back to her room on shaking legs. She sat at the small writing desk and composed a note to Lucas explaining what had happened and telling him they could not see each other anymore. It was one of the hardest things she had ever done, but she could not be the reason he lost his chance at building a future. The next morning she left the note with Samuel at the general store, fighting back tears as she placed it in his care. Then she returned to Marcus's house and threw herself into her work, trying not to think about the light that had just gone out of her life. 3 days passed before Samuel found her in the store during her weekly shopping trip. "Miss Wright," he said quietly, drawing her aside, "I have a message for you. Lucas came by yesterday. He said to tell you that Marcus Dalton's threats do not scare him and that he is not going anywhere. He said if you want to see him, he will be waiting by the creek every afternoon at 2 o'clock until you show up." Winona closed her eyes, torn between gratitude and terror. "Please tell him he needs to stop. Tell him I am serious about this." "I told him that," Samuel said gently. "He said you are worth the risk." Those were his exact words. "You are worth the risk." For the next week, Winona kept herself locked in Marcus's house, refusing to allow herself to go to the creek, even though she knew Lucas was waiting there. She could not be selfish enough to let him throw away his future for her. She simply could not. But on the 8th day, Marcus hosted one of his dinner parties, and Winona found herself serving food to Monticello's wealthy elite while they discussed their business dealings and their social status as though the people serving them were invisible. And somewhere during the evening, as she poured wine for a banker who was bragging about foreclosing on a widow's property, something inside her snapped. She was so tired of being invisible, so tired of being treated like property, so tired of letting other people control her life because she was afraid of the consequences of choosing herself for once. The next afternoon, she walked out of Marcus Dalton's house and followed the creek north until she found Lucas sitting on the fallen log where they had spent so many afternoons together. He looked thinner than she remembered, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. When he saw her, he stood slowly, as though he could not quite believe she was real. "I am so sorry," Winona said, the words tumbling out. "I was trying to protect you, but I realize now that I was just being a coward. I was letting fear control me the same way I let Thomas control me, the same way I am letting Marcus control me. I am so tired of living like this, Lucas. I am so tired of being afraid." Lucas crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and gathered her into his arms. "You are the bravest person I know," he said fiercely, "and I meant what I said. You are worth any risk. You are worth everything." "I do not have anything to offer you," Winona said against his chest. "No money, no property. My reputation is ruined. I come with nothing but problems and complications." "You have yourself," Lucas said, pulling back to cup her face in his hands. "That is all I need. That is everything." "Marcus will try to destroy you." "Let him try. I have been talking to the foreman at the Rocking M. He knows about my situation." "About us?" "He said Marcus has been throwing his weight around for years, trying to control every ranch in the territory, but he does not have as much power as he pretends. The Rocking M does not need Marcus Dalton's business connections, and they are not going to fire me because some rich man gets his pride hurt." "Are you certain?" Winona asked, hardly daring to hope. "I am certain that I love you," Lucas said. "I am certain that I want to build a life with you. And I am certain that we can figure out the rest together if you will have me." Winona looked up at this man, who had shown her what real love looked like, who had been patient and kind and brave when she was too frightened to be brave herself. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will have you." Lucas kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the demanding, possessive kisses Thomas had given her. This was a kiss between equals, between partners who chose each other freely. When they finally pulled apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "We need to get you out of Marcus's house. Tonight, before he has a chance to retaliate or make things worse." "I have that agreement he signed," Winona said. "The one that says I can leave whenever I want. It is in my journal." "Then go back, get your things, and leave. I will meet you at the edge of town with a horse. We can ride out to the Rocking M. The foreman's wife is a good woman. She will let you stay with them until we can figure out next steps." Winona nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "What about Thomas? Technically, Marcus paid off his debt, but if I leave—" "That is between Marcus and Thomas," Lucas said firmly. "You do not owe Thomas anything, Winona. He gave up any claim on you when he sold you like property. Whatever consequences come from this, he deserves every one of them." An hour later, Winona walked out of Marcus Dalton's house for the last time with her carpet bag in hand and the written agreement tucked safely in her pocket. Mrs. Chen had watched her pack with knowing eyes, but said nothing. As Winona reached the front door, the housekeeper called out softly, "Miss Wright?" Winona turned. "Good luck. You are braver than you think." Winona felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I hope you enjoy your time with your family." Lucas was waiting where he said he would be, holding the reins of 2 horses. He helped her mount, then swung up onto his own horse, and they rode north out of Monticello as the sun set behind the red rock formations that surrounded the town. The Rocking M Ranch was a sprawling operation, with well-maintained buildings and healthy-looking cattle grazing across acres of good grassland. The foreman, a weathered man in his 50s named John Harper, met them at the main house with his wife Margaret. "Lucas told us about your situation," Margaret said kindly, taking Winona's bag. "You are welcome to stay with us as long as you need. We have a spare room, and I can always use help with the cooking during the busy season." "I do not want to be a burden," Winona began, but John cut her off. "You are not a burden, miss. You are helping Lucas, and Lucas is one of the best hands I've ever had the privilege of working with. That makes you family in my book." Over the next few days, Winona waited for Marcus to send men after her or to press charges or to make good on his threats. But nothing happened. When Lucas went into town for supplies, he learned that Marcus had simply hired a new housekeeper and told people that Winona's services were no longer required. He was too proud to admit publicly that his housekeeper had walked away, so he pretended the separation had been his idea. As for Thomas, the gossip mill reported that Marcus had indeed called in his debt. The ranch had been sold at auction, and Thomas had left Monticello with the woman from Junction, heading west toward California to try his luck in the gold fields. Winona felt nothing when she heard the news. No sadness or satisfaction, just a distant sense of closure. That chapter of her life was over. The autumn turned into winter, and Winona settled into life at the Rocking M. She helped Margaret with the cooking and the household chores, and she began to learn about ranching from watching how the operation functioned. Lucas spent his days working with the cattle and horses, and his evenings sitting with Winona on the front porch of the Harper house, making plans for their future. In late November, he took her to see the 40 acres the ranch was selling. It was beautiful land, running along a bend in the San Juan River with good grass and several mature cottonwood trees. Lucas had been saving every penny he earned, and he almost had enough for the down payment. "I want to build a house here," he said, standing with his arm around Winona's waist as they looked out over the property. "Small at first, just a few rooms, but solid, built to last. And I want to build it with you, Winona. Will you marry me?" She had known the question was coming, but her heart still soared when she heard him actually ask it. "Yes," she said, turning to face him, 1,000 times yes. They were married in early December in a small ceremony at the church in Monticello. Margaret stood up with Winona, and John stood up with Lucas, and the Harper family filled the front pews with warmth and love. Winona wore a simple blue dress that Margaret had helped her sew, and Lucas wore his best shirt and a new vest he had purchased special for the occasion. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with a tenderness that made her believe in happy endings again. They celebrated afterward with a meal at the Harper house, and that night Lucas took her to a small cabin on the Rocking M property that John had said they could use until their own house was ready. "I know it is not much," Lucas said as he carried her over the threshold, "but it is ours." "It is perfect," Winona said, and meant it. The cabin was tiny and drafty and furnished with cast-offs, but it represented something she had never really had before: freedom. The freedom to choose her own life. The freedom to love and be loved in return. That night, as Lucas held her in his arms, Winona finally understood the difference between what she had thought was love with Thomas and what real love actually felt like. Real love was not about grand gestures or empty promises. It was about showing up every day. It was about choosing your partner over and over again, even when things were difficult. It was about respect and honesty and being willing to work together to build something lasting. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, running his fingers through her hair. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Winona said. "How close I came to never knowing what this feels like." "I am the lucky one," Lucas said, kissing the top of her head. "I have been alone for so long, Winona, working and saving and planning for a future that always felt kind of empty because I did not have anyone to share it with. And then I met you, and suddenly everything made sense. You are my home, not this cabin or the land we are going to buy or any of that. You, wherever you are, that is where I want to be." Winona turned in his arms so she could look at him. "I love you, Lucas Zimmerman. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared," he said softly. "I am not going anywhere. I am yours for as long as you will have me." "Then I guess you are stuck with me forever." "That sounds just about perfect." Winter settled over San Juan County with cold nights and occasional snow. Lucas continued working at the Rocking M, saving money toward their land purchase. Winona helped Margaret with the household work and learned to cook for the ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. She also began helping with the ranch accounts, discovering she had a knack for organization and numbers that John Harper appreciated. By February, Lucas had saved enough for the down payment. He and Winona met with John and the ranch owner to finalize the paperwork, and suddenly they were landowners. 40 acres along the San Juan River with water rights and grazing rights and the promise of a future built on their own terms. They broke ground on the house in early March when the weather warmed enough to work the soil for a foundation. Lucas did most of the construction himself with help from some of the other ranch hands on their days off. Winona worked alongside him, learning to use tools and helping with the lighter work. It was hard, exhausting labor, but it was also the most satisfying thing she had ever done. Every board they placed, every nail they drove was a statement of their commitment to each other and to the life they were building together. By late May, the house was finished enough to move into. It was small, just 3 rooms and a loft, but it had a solid roof and a good fireplace and windows that looked out over their land toward the river. Margaret gave them a wedding quilt she had been working on all winter, and John contributed a table and chairs he had built years ago. On the day they moved in, Lucas carried Winona over the threshold just like he had at the cabin, but this time tears streamed down both their faces. "We did it," Winona whispered. "We actually did it." "We did it together," Lucas said, setting her down gently. "Everything worth doing, we will do together. That is the promise I am making you right now. You are never going to have to face anything alone again." That summer was one of the happiest times of Winona's life. She planted a garden near the house and tended it carefully, learning which vegetables grew best in the high desert climate. Lucas worked their small herd of cattle and horses, building the foundation of what would eventually become a successful ranch. They worked from dawn until dusk most days, falling into bed exhausted but content. In the evenings, they would sit on the front porch and watch the sunset over the red rock formations to the west. Sometimes they talked about their plans and dreams. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped together, grateful for everything they had. In August, Winona realized she had missed her monthly bleeding for the second time. She waited another week to be certain before telling Lucas, not wanting to get his hopes up if she was mistaken. But when she finally shared the news, his reaction made her glad she had waited until she was sure. "A baby?" he said, his voice full of wonder. He placed his hand gently on her stomach, which was still flat and showed no sign of the life growing inside. "We are going to have a baby?" "In late winter or early spring," Winona confirmed. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" Lucas laughed and picked her up, spinning her around carefully before setting her back down. "Winona, I am more than happy. I am overjoyed. I am terrified. I am excited. I am all of it at once." "That's exactly how I feel," Winona said, laughing with him. They told Margaret and John the news the following Sunday when they rode to the Rockingham for dinner. Margaret cried happy tears and immediately began planning what she would teach Winona about caring for infants. John clapped Lucas on the back and told him he was going to make a fine father. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Winona's belly grew round and full, and Lucas treated her like she was made of spun glass, constantly worrying that she was working too hard or lifting things that were too heavy. She found his concern both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she knew it came from a place of love. In late February, as winter was beginning to release its grip on the land, Winona went into labor. Margaret came to stay with them, and Lucas rode for the doctor in Monticello. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. There were moments when Winona was certain she could not endure another minute, when the pain was so intense she thought she might split apart. But Lucas stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement, and somehow his presence gave her the strength to continue. Their son was born just as the sun was rising, coming into the world with a healthy cry that made Lucas weep with relief. The doctor placed the baby in Winona's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face of the child they had created together and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce and all-consuming that it took her breath away. "What should we name him?" Lucas asked, running a gentle finger over the baby's soft head. They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but had never quite settled on anything that felt right. Now, looking at their son's face in the golden morning light, Winona knew exactly what his name should be. "River," she said, "because we found each other and built our home beside the water, because rivers represent life and change and new beginnings." "River Zimmerman," Lucas said, testing the name. "I love it. It is perfect." The weeks after River's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings and learning how to care for a helpless infant. Winona was exhausted in a way she had never experienced before, but she was also happier than she had ever been. Lucas proved to be a natural father, walking the floor with River when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, and singing soft lullabies in the middle of the night. One evening, when River was about 6 weeks old, Winona woke from a nap to find Lucas sitting in the rocking chair by the window with the baby asleep on his chest. The setting sun painted them both in shades of gold and amber, and the look of pure contentment on Lucas's face made her eyes fill with tears. This was what love looked like, she thought. This quiet moment of a father holding his sleeping son. This choice to be present and engaged and committed, day after day, even when things were hard. This was what she had been searching for all along without knowing it. As if sensing her gaze, Lucas looked up and smiled at her. "Hey," he said softly, so as not to wake the baby. "How are you feeling?" "Like the luckiest woman alive," Winona whispered back. "Even though you are exhausted and your body is still recovering and our son has a truly impressive ability to cry at 2 a.m. Especially because of all that, Winona said, standing and crossing to them. She placed a gentle kiss on River's head, then on Lucas's lips. This is real, Lucas. This life we have built, this family we have created, it is messy and imperfect and sometimes really, really hard, but it is real, and it is ours. I would not trade it for anything, Narcissus, Lucas said. Not for all the gold in California or all the cattle in Texas. This right here, you and River, you are everything that matters. The years that followed were full of hard work and steady growth. Their ranch prospered as Lucas proved himself to be a skilled cattleman with an eye for good breeding stock. Winona managed the household and the accounts and raised River, who grew into a bright, energetic little boy with his father's honey-colored eyes and his mother's determined spirit. When River was 3 years old, Winona gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. She had dark hair like Lucas and a sweet, gentle disposition that balanced River's more adventurous nature. 2 years after that came another son, Daniel, who was quiet and thoughtful and seemed to observe everything with solemn eyes. The house that had once seemed plenty large for 2 people became crowded with 3 children, so Lucas added on 2 more rooms and a proper second floor. Winona planted more gardens and fruit trees, building up stores of preserved food to feed their growing family through the winters. They hired a hand to help with the ranch work, a young man from Mexico named Carlos who quickly became part of their extended family. Through all of it, through the exhausting days and the sleepless nights and the 1,000 small challenges that come with building a life together, Lucas and Winona never lost sight of what mattered most: each other. They made time for quiet conversations on the porch after the children were in bed. They celebrated small victories and supported each other through disappointments. They laughed together and sometimes argued, but they always chose each other in the end. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Winona by taking her back to the spot by the creek where they had first talked over coffee. Margaret agreed to watch the children for the afternoon, and Lucas had packed a basket with bread and cheese, and even a bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion. I cannot believe it has been 10 years, Winona said, sitting on the same fallen log where she had sat all those years ago. Best 10 years of my life, Lucas said, pouring wine into 2 cups. I know it has not always been easy. I know there have been times when money was tight and we were both stretched thin. But I would not change a single moment of it, Winona. Not one. Not even the time River decided to let all the chickens out of the coop and we spent 3 hours chasing them? Winona asked with a smile. Lucas laughed. Okay, maybe I would change that one moment, but everything else stands. They drank their wine and ate their simple meal and talked about all the years behind them and all the years still to come. They talked about River's plans to eventually take over the ranch, about Grace's love of reading and Daniel's fascination with building things. They talked about possibly adding more land if the opportunity arose, about helping Carlos buy his own place someday. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lucas pulled Winona close and kissed her the way he had on their wedding day. "Thank you," he said when they finally pulled apart. "For what?" Winona asked. "For taking a chance on a cowboy who had nothing to offer but hard work and honest love. For building this life with me. For giving me a family and a home and a reason to wake up every morning grateful to be alive. For being my partner in every sense of the word." Winona felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I should be thanking you," she said. "You showed me what real love looks like, Lucas. You showed me that I deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." "We gave it to each other," Lucas said softly. "That is how partnership works. We built this together, and we will keep building it together for as long as we live." As they rode home in the gathering dusk, Winona thought about the terrified, heartbroken woman she had been 10 years ago when Thomas had sold her to Marcus Dalton. That woman had felt like her life was over, like she would never know happiness or safety or real love again. But she had been wrong. Her life had not ended that terrible night in the alley behind the saloon. It had simply taken an unexpected turn, leading her down a path she never could have imagined. Yes, there had been pain and betrayal and fear, but there had also been healing and redemption and the discovery that she was stronger than she ever knew. And most importantly, there had been Lucas, the cowboy who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, who had been patient and kind and brave enough to love her even when loving her came with risks and complications. The years continued to pass in the way years do, bringing both joys and sorrows. They lost John Harper to a heart attack when River was 12, and they took Margaret in to live with them because she had become like a mother to Winona. They survived a drought that tested their resources and their faith. They celebrated River's 18th birthday and watched him begin to court a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property. Through all of it, Lucas and Winona remained each other's anchor and compass. They had built something lasting, something real, something that no amount of hardship could shake. Their love had deepened over the years, growing from the passionate intensity of new romance into something steadier and more enduring, like bedrock beneath the shifting sands. On a warm spring evening when Winona was 42 years old, she sat on the front porch of their home and watched Lucas teaching Daniel how to rope a fence post in the front yard. River was off visiting his sweetheart, and Grace was inside helping Margaret prepare dinner. The air smelled of blooming wildflowers and fresh grass and the promise of a good growing season. Lucas caught her eye across the yard and smiled, the same smile that had first caught her attention all those years ago in front of the general store in Monticello. Even after more than 2 decades together, that smile still made her heart skip a beat. He said something to Daniel and then walked over to the porch, climbing the steps and settling into the rocking chair beside hers. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Happy?" he asked. "Completely," Winona said, squeezing his hand. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," Lucas said. "You know, sometimes I think about that day I first saw you outside the general store. You looked so sad and so lost. And I just knew I had to talk to you. I had no idea that conversation would lead to all this." He gestured at the house, the land, their children. "I am glad you talked to me," Winona said. "I am glad you did not give up on me even when I tried to push you away to protect you." "I am glad you were brave enough to choose yourself," Lucas said, "to walk away from Marcus's house and build a new life." "That took courage, Winona." "I learned courage from you," she said. "You showed me that I was worth fighting for." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. Inside the house, they could hear Margaret laughing at something Grace had said, and in the yard, Daniel had finally managed to lasso the fence post and was whooping with triumph. This was their legacy, Winona thought. Not just the land or the ranch or the material things they had accumulated, but this sense of family and belonging and unconditional love. They had created a space where their children could grow up feeling safe and valued, where everyone was treated with respect and kindness, where love was not a bargaining chip, but a freely given gift. She thought about the woman she had been at 20, desperate and heartbroken and convinced that Thomas's betrayal had destroyed her chance at happiness. If she could go back and speak to that younger version of herself, she would tell her to hold on, to have faith, to believe that the darkest moments often come just before the dawn. But she would also tell her that the pain had meaning, that the betrayal had taught her important lessons about her own worth and strength. She would tell her that sometimes the worst things that happen to us end up leading us to the best things, that sometimes we have to lose everything before we can find what truly matters. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, studying her face in the fading light. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Winona said, "for all of it. For the hard times that taught me who I really was, for the day you walked into my life, for every moment that led me to right here, right now, sitting on this porch with you." Lucas lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I love you, Winona Zimmerman. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that for as long as I draw breath." "I love you too," she whispered. "Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, hands clasped together, two people who had found each other in the midst of pain and built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. Their story was not one of perfect romance or fairy tale endings. It was a story of hard work and commitment and the daily choice to love each other even when things were difficult. It was a story about resilience and redemption and the power of human connection to heal even the deepest wounds. It was a story about a woman who had been treated like property and found the courage to reclaim her own worth, and about a cowboy who had the wisdom to see her value when others saw only an object to be used. Most of all, it was a story about real love, the kind that shows up every day and does the work and builds something lasting one moment at a time. The kind of love that transforms lives and creates families and leaves a legacy that echoes through generations. In the years that followed, River married his sweetheart and brought her to live on the ranch, eventually taking over the daily operations as Lucas and Winona grew older. Grace married a teacher from Monticello and moved into town, where she opened a small school for children whose families could not afford formal education. Daniel surprised everyone by developing a passion for woodworking and became known throughout the territory for his beautiful, carefully crafted furniture. Lucas and Winona became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family tree spread and grow in ways they never could have imagined. They remained active on the ranch as long as their bodies allowed, though eventually they had to accept that they could no longer do the heavy physical work they had done in their younger years. On a summer evening when Winona was 68 years old, she and Lucas sat on the same porch where they had spent countless hours over the decades. Lucas's hair was completely white now, and Winona's face showed the lines and wrinkles earned from a lifetime of laughter and tears and years spent working under the desert sun. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love beside a creek more than 40 years earlier. "Do you ever have regrets?" Lucas asked, his voice a bit more gravelly with age, but still warm and gentle. "About what?" Winona asked. "About how things turned out. About choosing this life." Winona was quiet for a moment, genuinely considering the question. "No," she finally said, "I do not have regrets. I have learned lessons, certainly. I wish I had not wasted 2 years of my life on Thomas. I wish I had seen his weakness earlier. But I cannot regret those experiences because they led me to you. And you, Lucas Zimmerman, are the best thing that ever happened to me." Lucas smiled, and despite the passage of time, that smile still had the power to warm her from the inside out. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, too," he said. "Before I met you, I was just drifting through life without any real purpose. You gave me something to work for, something to build toward. You made me want to be better than I was." "We made each other better," Winona corrected gently. "That is what love does when it is real." They watched the sun set together as they had done thousands of times before, and as darkness fell and the stars emerged, they remained on the porch, hands clasped together, grateful for every moment they had been given. Lucas passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 years later, at the age of 75. He had spent the day working with River to repair a section of fence, had eaten a hearty dinner surrounded by family, and had gone to bed holding Winona's hand, as he had done every night for more than 45 years. When Winona woke the next morning, he was simply gone, his face peaceful and serene. The grief nearly broke her. After more than 4 decades of partnership, of building every aspect of her life around their shared dreams and their daily rhythms, the loss felt like having half of herself torn away. But even in the midst of her sorrow, she felt gratitude for the years they had been given. So many people lived their entire lives without experiencing the kind of love she and Lucas had shared. She had been blessed beyond measure. River and his family insisted she stay on the ranch, in the house she and Lucas had built together. She spent her remaining years surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling stories about the early days and about Lucas and about how they had built everything from nothing through hard work and commitment and love. Winona lived to be 82 years old, active and sharp-minded until the very end. On her final evening, sitting on the porch as the sun set over the land she and Lucas had claimed together all those years ago, she felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. She had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with meaning and connection and love. As she closed her eyes for the last time, her final thought was of Lucas, of that first conversation by the creek when he had told her she deserved better than what Thomas had given her. He had spent the rest of his life proving those words true, showing her every single day what real love looked like. And in the end, that was the legacy they left behind. Not just the ranch or the family or the material success they had achieved, but the example of what it meant to truly love another person, to choose them every day, to work through difficulties together, to build something lasting based on respect and partnership and unwavering commitment. Their story became part of family legend passed down through generations. Great-great-grandchildren who never met Lucas and Winona still heard the tale of how they found each other in the midst of betrayal and hardship, how they built a life together on 40 acres along the San Juan River, how their love had transformed both their lives and created ripples that spread far beyond anything they could have imagined. It was a story about resilience and redemption, about finding light in darkness, about having the courage to choose yourself even when the world tells you that you do not matter, about recognizing real love when it appears, even if it comes in unexpected packages. Most of all, it was a story with a happy ending, not because their lives were perfect or easy, but because they found each other and chose to face whatever came together. In a world that often treated women as property and valued men only for what they could produce or acquire, they created a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection. They built a home not just of wood and nails, but of love and laughter and the daily choice to show up for each other. And that, their descendants agreed, was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind.